Admiral Krix-Voth stared at the holographic display with all four of his compound eyes, each one twitching independently as he processed what should have been impossible data. The coffee stains on his command console, yes, coffee stains, because apparently even the most advanced species in the Galactic Federation had discovered that particular liquid vice, seemed to mock him as the scanner readings refused to change. "Run the scan again, Lieutenant X9, he commanded, his voice carrying that particular tone reserved for moments when reality decides to take a vacation without leaving a forwarding address. The young officer's tentacles danced across the control surface with practiced precision. "Sir, the readings are consistent. 37 vessels of unknown configuration approaching at sublight speed. Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases." Krix-Voth's mandibles clicked in what passed for nervous laughter among his species. "Unknown configuration? Lieutenant, we've catalogued every spacefaring race in 3 galaxy clusters. Our databases contain vessel designs from civilizations that went extinct before your great-great-grandmother was a gleam in a spawning pool." "Yes, sir. That's what makes this particularly concerning." The Admiral's secondary arms gestured dismissively while his primary ones remained folded. "Concerning? My dear X9, concerning is when the Federation Council cuts our military budget again. Concerning is when my wife discovers I've been sneaking Torellian whiskey in my personal quarters. This?" He gestured at the display. "This is either a sensor malfunction or the universe's idea of a practical joke." Commander Zalthek, whose purple-hued skin had taken on an unhealthy green tinge, approached the command station. "Admiral, perhaps we should alert High Command. The approaching vessels, they're broadcasting something." "Broadcasting? Well, that's a relief. Pirates and raiders usually don't bother with formal announcements. Put it through the universal translators." The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a voice, surprisingly melodic, though carrying an edge that made several bridge officers unconsciously check their sidearms, filled the command center. "This is Captain Maya Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet vessel, Indomitable. We are responding to your Federation's, shall we say, aggressive expansion into what you've designated as Sector 7742. We'd like to have a word." Silence stretched across the bridge like an uncomfortable dinner conversation after someone mentions politics. Finally, Communications Officer Blix-42 spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sir? The translators are showing something unusual." "Define unusual, officer." "The language structure, it's completely unknown." "But sir, the translation confidence is showing 100% accuracy." That's impossible unless what? Unless the speakers are somehow related to the species that created the original translation matrices. Admiral Krix-Voth felt a cold sensation crawl up his exoskeleton, a feeling he hadn't experienced since his academy days when he'd accidentally walked into an airlock without checking the exterior pressure. "Officer Blix, remind me, which species created those matrices?" The precursors, sir. The mythical race that supposedly seeded the galaxy with basic technology before vanishing without a trace." "Mythical," the Admiral repeated slowly. "Yes, quite mythical indeed." The human voice returned, now carrying what could only be described as barely contained amusement. "We can hear your transmissions, by the way. Your encryption is charmingly primitive. Now, about that conversation." Krix-Voth's 4 eyes swiveled to focus on the tactical display. The approaching vessels had maintained perfect formation throughout their approach, no deviation, no course corrections, as if they knew exactly where every asteroid and space mine had been positioned. More troubling still, they showed no energy signatures consistent with active shields. "They're not running defensive screens," reported Lieutenant X9, confusion evident in his tone. "Either they're supremely confident, or they don't need them," Commander Zalthek finished grimly. "Weapons status?" the Admiral inquired, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "All batteries charged and ready, sir. Targeting solutions are, well, sir, this is where it gets interesting. Krix-Voth's mandibles stopped clicking entirely. In his experience, when tactical officers used the word interesting, it usually meant someone was about to have a very bad day, and it probably wasn't going to be the enemy. The vessels are maintaining formation, but our targeting computers can't achieve lock. Every time we attempt to lock on, the targeting system reports invalid target parameters. Invalid target parameters? What does that mean? Honestly, sir, I have no idea. It's like the computers don't recognize them as actual ships. The human voice returned, and this time there was definitely laughter in it. Oh, that's adorable. You're trying to target us with quantum phase-locked particle accelerators. How wonderfully retro. Tell me, do you still use vacuum tubes in your communications arrays too? Bridge officers exchanged glances that would have been meaningful if anyone had actually understood what was happening. The Admiral decided that someone needed to take charge of this increasingly surreal situation. This is Admiral Krix-Voth of the Federation Dreadnought Inevitable Victory. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. Our intentions? Well, Admiral, that's refreshingly direct. We intend to discuss your recent habit of strip mining planets that happen to belong to species that can't fight back. Specifically, the incident in the Kepler 438 system last month. Krix-Voth's memory banks engaged, sorting through recent military actions. Kepler 438. Yes, a primitive world with barely space-age technology. The Federation had needed the rare minerals for their expansion fleet, and the local population had been relocated to more suitable habitats. That was a lawful acquisition under Federation Colonial Protocol 7 Alpha, he stated, proud that his voice remained steady. Lawful, the human voice repeated, and now there was something else there, something that made the bridge temperature feel several degrees colder. How delightfully bureaucratic. Tell me, Admiral, what's the Federation's policy on species that shoot back? Before Krix-Voth could respond, Lieutenant Yex-9's voice cut across the bridge with barely controlled panic. Sir. Energy spike detected. All vessels are powering weapons. The tactical display lit up like a festival celebration, except instead of colorful lights indicating joy and merriment, these particular lights indicated enough concentrated firepower to reduce a small moon to its component atoms. Impossible, whispered Commander Zalthek. Those energy readings, a single one of those vessels is outputting more power than our entire battle group. How many ships do we have in this sector? The Admiral asked, though he was beginning to suspect that the number might be largely irrelevant. 47 vessels, sir. Including 3 dreadnoughts and 12 heavy cruisers. The human voice returned, now carrying what sounded suspiciously like genuine sympathy. 47 ships. That's actually pretty impressive for a border patrol fleet. Shame you're pointing them at us. We haven't fired, protested the Admiral. No, but you've been thinking about it very loudly. Your targeting systems have been pinging our hulls for the past 3 minutes. Where we come from, that's considered somewhat rude. Officer Blix-42 looked up from her console, her skin now completely green. Sir, I'm detecting massive gravitational distortions around their vessels. It's like space itself is bending around them. That's because it is, the human voice said helpfully. Gravity manipulation isn't exactly rocket science once you understand the underlying mathematics. Though I suppose it would be rocket science, technically speaking. Advanced rocket science. Admiral Krix-Voth realized that his military academy training had not prepared him for this situation. For years of advanced tactical studies, 2 decades of combat experience, and a library of strategic manuals that could fill a small warehouse, and not one of them had included a chapter on what to do when mythical species appear with impossible technology and start making jokes about your weapon systems. What are you? He asked, abandoning all pretense of military protocol. There was a pause, and when the voice returned, it carried a weight that seemed to settle into the bones of every creature on the bridge. We're humans, Admiral. And contrary to popular belief, we're not mythical. We're just really, really good at hiding. The tactical display updated, showing the human vessels moving into what any military officer would recognize as attack formation. Except this particular attack formation somehow managed to look casual, as if 37 ships had just happened to arrange themselves in a pattern that could obliterate everything within a 3 light-minute radius while discussing the weather. Now then, the human voice continued conversationally, about that conversation we wanted to have. Admiral Krix-Voth had faced down rebel fleets, navigated political minefields that made actual minefields look like pleasant garden paths, and once survived a dinner party hosted by his mother-in-law. None of these experiences had prepared him for the sight currently dominating his main display. The human ships had done something that violated approximately 17 different laws of physics. They weren't moving through space anymore, they were folding it, bending reality around themselves like origami made from the fundamental forces of the universe. And they were doing it while maintaining perfect tea-time conversation etiquette. "Admiral," Captain Chen's voice continued, still maddeningly pleasant, "we've taken the liberty of scanning your fleet's databanks. Fascinating reading material you've got there. Particularly the files labeled Acceptable Casualties in Primitive Species Relocation." Lieutenant Yex-9's tentacles had gone completely rigid. "Sir, how are they accessing our secured networks? Our encryption uses quantum entangled particles in isolated processing cores." "Oh, that," Chen replied, apparently monitoring their communications without effort. "Quantum encryption. Very clever. We used something similar about, 300 years ago. Before we figured out how to simply ask the particles nicely to tell us what they knew." Commander Zalthek leaned closer to the Admiral's command chair, whispering urgently. "Sir, recommend immediate tactical withdrawal. If they can breach our networks at will, they can access our weapons systems," Krix-Voth finished, the implications hitting him like a cargo hauler to the cranium. "Captain Chen, what exactly do you want from us?" "Want? Admiral, we don't want anything from you. We want something for the 12 billion sentients you displaced from Kepler 438. You remember them, don't you? The ones your reports described as technologically insignificant and culturally expendable." The Admiral's memory bank supplied the relevant details with uncomfortable clarity. The Kepler 438 operation had been textbook efficient, minimal resistance, maximum resource extraction, population relocated to designated habitat stations. Standard procedure for expanding Federation territory. Those beings were compensated according to Federation colonial protocols, he stated, though the words felt increasingly hollow. They received new habitation facilities and integration opportunities. Laughter echoed across the bridge, not cruel laughter, but the kind that suggested someone had just watched a child try to convince adults that the crayon marks on the wall were actually sophisticated abstract art. "Integration opportunities," Chen repeated. "That's a delightful euphemism. Tell me, Admiral, how would you feel about integration opportunities if someone decided your homeworld had minerals they needed?" Before Krix-Voth could formulate a response, Officer Blix-42's voice cut through the tension. "Sir. Multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. It's a lot of contacts." The tactical display exploded with new signatures, dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of vessels materializing from seemingly empty space. Ships of every conceivable design, from sleek fighters that looked like they'd been grown rather than built, to massive constructs that defied conventional understanding of structural engineering. "What in the seven hells of Vorthan is that?" gasped Commander Zalthek. Captain Chen's voice carried what sounded distinctly like pride. "That, Commander, is what happens when you mess with a species under human protection. Allow me to introduce the Liberation Fleet, representatives from every civilization the Federation has relocated over the past 50 years." Admiral Krix-Voth stared at the display, watching as his 47-ship battle group became a very small fish in a very large, very angry ocean. "This is impossible. Most of those species barely had space flight capabilities." "Had, Admiral. Past tense. Funny thing about species facing extinction, they become remarkably motivated students. We may have provided some educational assistance. Lieutenant Yex-9's voice cracked slightly. Sir, I'm reading weapon signatures from technologies that shouldn't exist. Energy weapons that phase through conventional shielding, gravity bombs that create localized black holes, and something the computer is identifying as weaponized quantum uncertainty. Weaponized quantum uncertainty? Krix-Voth repeated weakly. It means, Chen explained helpfully, that you might get hit by a missile, or you might not, but you won't know which until you observe the result. And the act of observation affects the outcome. It's quite elegant, actually. Heisenberg would be proud. The Admiral's tactical training finally reasserted itself. You're vastly outnumbered, he said, grasping for some semblance of strategic advantage. Whatever your capabilities, the Federation has millions of vessels across hundreds of sectors. Millions of vessels, Chen mused. That does sound impressive. Tell me, how many of those millions are currently experiencing mysterious technical difficulties? As if summoned by her words, the bridge's communication array lit up with incoming priority transmissions. Voice after voice filled the speakers, each carrying the same thread of barely controlled panic. Mayday, Mayday. This is the FSS Dominator. Our navigation systems have been compromised. We're locked out of all primary systems. Federation Command, this is Admiral Krix-Voth. Our entire battle fleet is dead in space. Repeat, all ships non-responsive. Emergency broadcast to all Federation vessels. Unknown entities have infiltrated our networks. Weapon systems offline, engines offline, even the coffee dispensers are malfunctioning. Admiral Krix-Voth felt his exoskeleton go cold. How many ships? Captain Chen's response carried the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. Oh, just the ones that matter. Roughly 40% of your active fleet, give or take a few thousand vessels. The other 60% are still functional, of course, we're not monsters. They'll need those ships to transport humanitarian aid to the species they've displaced. Humanitarian aid? Well, someone needs to rebuild all those worlds you strip-mined. Fascinating thing about human engineering, we're very good at putting things back together. Almost as good as we are at taking them apart when necessary. Officer Blix-42 looked up from her console, her expression suggesting she'd just witnessed the fundamental laws of reality submit their resignation letters. Sir, the human vessels, they're not just manipulating space-time. They're doing something to our weapons that I don't understand. Every time we target them, the targeting system reports that we're aiming at empty space. That's because you are, in a sense, Chen explained patiently. Our ships exist in a slightly different dimensional phase than yours. We're here, but we're also not here. It's quite convenient for avoiding unpleasant social interactions. Commander Zalthek stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd finally grasped the true scope of their situation. You've been watching us. All this time, you've been studying our technology, our tactics, our entire civilization. Studying? Oh, my dear Commander, we've been babysitting you. There's a difference. The Liberation Fleet had arranged itself in perfect formation around the Federation battle group, not an attack formation, but something far more unsettling, a protective circle, as if the human vessels and their allies were adults preventing children from hurting themselves with dangerous toys. What happens now? Admiral Krix-Voth asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Now? Now you get to make a choice, Admiral. Option 1, you and your Federation continue business as usual, and we demonstrate exactly why picking on defenseless species is a remarkably poor life choice. Option 2, you help us fix what you've broken, and we teach you how civilized beings actually behave in a galaxy full of neighbors. And if we refuse? Captain Chen's voice carried a finality that seemed to echo from the depths of space itself. Admiral, you're familiar with your own mythology, correct? The stories your species tells about the great darkness that comes for those who prey upon the innocent? Old stories. Legends meant to frighten children. All legends have roots in truth. We are that truth, Admiral. We are the species that stands between predators and prey. We are the reason your nightmares have nightmares. And we have been watching you for a very, very long time. The tactical display showed the human vessels beginning to move, not toward the Federation fleet, but around it, forming patterns that seemed to bend light itself. Space twisted, stars shifted, and for a moment that lasted eternity, Admiral Krix-Voth saw the galaxy as the humans saw it, not as territory to be conquered, but as a home to be protected. Choose wisely, Admiral, Captain Chen said softly. The universe is watching, and humanity keeps very detailed records. As the human fleet demonstrated technologies that made Federation science look like stone tools, Admiral Krix-Voth realized that his species' greatest mistake hadn't been underestimating human capabilities. It had been assuming that power without compassion was strength, rather than the weakness it truly was. The myths had returned, and they were absolutely nothing like the stories.